What is going on, Jets fans? This is Luca here from Gangrene Chronicles, and tonight I will be recapping the Jets' 30-10 preseason victory over the Green Bay Packers in their first preseason game. With that being said, if you guys haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when I go live or drop a new video. Regardless, let's get into the breakdown. So we'll start out with the starters from both ends. The Jets' defense was on the field first, and I thought they had a very nice impact. Some notables that I took note of were Sauce Gardner, Will McDonald, and Jay Tuifelli. So starting with Sauce, he did have one pass interference penalty. I would say it was pretty 50-50 in my opinion, but he seemed like his old self. He was breaking up passes. He was physical in the run game, which I liked, and the issue that fans have had with Sauce in years past was his lack of physicality in the run game. Too much arm tackling, but Sauce was meeting guys at the line of scrimmage, bringing the ball carrier down, which I much appreciated. Going to Jay Tuifelli, who was taking over for Byron Coart in terms of the defensive tackle's position next to Quinnen Williams. Coart was out with an injury, so Tuifelli stepped in. Besides the offsides penalty, he did make quite an impact. He had 1.5 sacks. He also recovered a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown for the Jets. He was everywhere and anywhere today, trying his best to stop the run, but he was also creating holes through the middle of the offensive line and the pass rush. So Tuifelli definitely impressed with the defensive tackle 2 position up for grabs. And another player that I thought impressed on the starter's side with the defense was Will McDonald. You saw his bulk. I talked about in the last video how he bulked up to about 245 pounds, getting big this offseason, and boy, did it ever show. He had some nice pressures. He didn't register a sack, but he was clearly making the offensive linemen really struggle to block him and get their hands in front of him. He was spinning, he was using his power, mixing that up a little bit. And if you see what Jermaine Johnson does with his stuff, hopefully Will McDonald can somewhat emulate that. Jermaine Johnson is a good mix of power and speed. Hopefully Will McDonald with the bulk up can follow in his direction. So moving to the offense, it was evident that the offense would have a huge magnifying glass on them tonight, with Justin Fields being the head of the snake. Now, Fields tonight was efficient. There wasn't too much wrong with his game. He was 3 or 4 tonight with 42 passing yards, 2 carries, 14 yards, and a rushing touchdown. He looked efficient. He looked like he could get through his reads. It wasn't too much complex play calling, but you could see that Justin Fields was executing the offense. He was being efficient. He was managing the game. That's all you could ask of Fields. And one of Fields' favorite receivers tonight, or I should say his favorite receiver tonight, was fullback Andrew Beck, who the Jets signed in the offseason. 2 receptions for 36 yards, I believe they were both 18 yards, 18-yard receptions on both those plays. And what I liked was they got Beck open, and Beck was wide open, and he was getting yards after the catch. It was essentially Justin Fields' safety blanket after reading the reads to see that the receivers weren't open. So maybe Andrew Beck is a possibility to not only make this roster, but to be an important key for Justin Fields in this offense. Another guy offensively that I think really stood out is Braylon Allen, and he's had a phenomenal offseason. He's had a phenomenal training camp this far. He clearly looks like the best running back in the room, and that could spell trouble for Breece Hall down the line. But Braylon Allen tonight, 8 carries, 33 yards, about 4.1 yards per carry. The thing with Braylon is when he sees a hole, he just hits it. And he has that speed just to get past defenders. And he also could bring defenders down with him. So he is hard to tackle. He's got speed. He's got the vision. We all know that. But it's great to see Braylon Allen have this type of performance and show that the offseason and a little bit of last season too wasn't a joke. But you do wonder if it does spell trouble for Breece Hall, who in my opinion didn't look as fast or as sharp with his cuts, and it kind of looked slow coming out of the backfield. So some other notes I made offensively, and must I say, I mentioned Andrew Beck earlier. The Jets did a very nice job of getting the tight ends involved. You see Zach Kuntz get involved. You had Neil Johnson get involved. Stone Smart, who I remarked in the last video was competing with Jeremy Ruckert for essentially the tight end 1, tight end 2 spot. Smart had a touchdown reception for 24 yards. It was off a very nice designed tight end screen from Tanner Engstrand. Jeremy Ruckert was very quiet tonight, and in my opinion, a lot of Jets fans' opinions as well. Obviously, I hold my own in this one. Stone Smart, in my opinion, should overtake Jeremy Ruckert soon enough, because Ruckert didn't really make much of an impact in the blocking, and he wasn't much of an impact in the receiving game. So you're essentially getting nothing out of him. He's just dead weight at this point, and it's such a shame because he is in a new coaching staff. He's in a new offense where he could thrive. He has Justin Fields, who's going to rely on the tight end quite a bit. So it's disappointing to see Rucker be essentially a player of non-impact. Some other notes I'd like to make too. You have Allen Lazard with the second team. There's clearly a wide receiver 2 position going on. Garrett Wilson did obviously line up with the ones. Tyler Johnson also lined up with the ones as well. Very notable. So is Josh Reynolds. Kind of stunned to see Allen Lazard not line up with the ones. He was with the 2s. So if you wonder how far down the depth chart Allen Lazard is, I mentioned in my last video too that the Jets are essentially making that wide receiver 2 position arbitrary, where there's a ton of competition going on at that position. You have guys like Tyler Johnson, you have guys like Malachi Corley, Allen Lazard, as I just mentioned. So there's plenty of guys there. Arian Smith, maybe he comes out of the woodworks and tries to really vie for that wide receiver 2 position, although unlikely. Obviously, I just mentioned Josh Reynolds as well. So how far down the depth chart is Allen Lazard really? He's to be honest as well, he's had a really quiet training camp, and that's concerning considering the new coaching staff and a new quarterback. It just shows that, in my opinion, he cannot play with a quarterback that's not named Aaron Rodgers. So 2 other players that I think have an outside shot to make the 53. Brandon Smith had 2 receptions and 23 yards. He had a really nice route on a third down play. It looked like a slant or an in route to the first down marker. A nice little juke move on the corner, and he got the first down. It was a good route by him. Maybe he makes the 53. I believe he was with the Jets practice squad last year. Maybe there's an outside chance with a lot of competition in the wide receiver room. But also with the running backs, Donovan Edwards, and he's actually had a really good training camp. UDFA out of Michigan. He had 9 rushes and 42 yards for 4.7 yards per carry. Now, for someone who was evaluating running backs throughout the Senior Bowl process, because Edwards was in the Senior Bowl, I wasn't too high on Edwards. I was not high on his vision. I wasn't high on his short-term explosion. But he just proved me wrong tonight, and he is definitely an outside shot to make the running back room with competition like Isaiah Davis, Braylon Allen, Breece Hall. And had it not been for a Liam Fornadell penalty, he would have had a touchdown, and a long touchdown at that. He would have, I believe, matched the Jets' longest preseason run since 1999, when Curtis Martin, I think, ran for like 69 or 70 yards. But obviously, there was a penalty, which negated the long run from Edwards. But keep an eye on Edwards as the preseason rolls on. Moving to the backups on the defensive side of the ball at the 2s and the 3s. We'll start with Leonard Taylor, and he forced a fumble for a touchdown, his most notable play of the night. And Taylor did not get a lot of playing time last year, especially towards the beginning and middle of the season, because he had guys like Javon Kinlaw in front of him. And the Jets really didn't have a proper DT2 next to Quentin Williams, as for partially why he was double-teamed a lot last year. They just didn't have a force next to him. So with this new coaching staff, I do think Taylor is going to really excel. Now, to how big his potential is or how far he can go, we don't know. But I think he's very comfortably could possibly be in this 53-man once again, or at least make the 53-man roster, be a rotation piece, and hopefully he gets somewhat consistent playing time. I'm not saying he has to be a starter next to Quentin Williams, but I definitely think he is due for a rotational spot at least. Another player from last year, whether it's an undrafted free agent or even a draft pick, Quanton Stiggers. And it's not so much he made plays defensively. He was actually very impactful on special teams as a gunner. He had 2 tackles. He was physical. So the Jets definitely have some versatility with Stiggers. He even, besides the special teams point, I thought his coverage skills were solid tonight, rock solid. So at the end of the day, Stiggers making an impact. And the name that I really wasn't familiar with coming into this game, coming into the recap, was Bump Cooper. And he spent he spent last year on 2 teams. He spent time with the Dolphins earlier in the offseason, and now he's with the Jets as a defensive back. He had some nice plays. He had 2 tackles, very physical, and 2 pass deflections as well. So maybe, possibly, the Jets can fit him on a practice squad, or maybe at the back end of the 53-man roster, there can be a lot of competition, a lot of bodies in that cornerback room, especially in the secondary. So Bump Cooper, Not really somebody who I've kept an eye on through preseason or training camp. Not somebody who's really made a name for himself. Definitely made a name for himself tonight against the Green Bay Packers. And I mentioned the turnover with the Leonard Taylor forced fumble. The Jets also forced another turnover on special teams. I thought their play on special teams was pretty clean tonight. Kicking was done a good job as well with Harrison Mevis. But regardless, Jamarcus Weston made a fumble recovery on McCall Hardman. Hardman coughed the ball up on a punt, and it allowed the Jets to score another couple of points. But the Jets were very sound of the special teams unit tonight. And going back to their defense real quick, they had a total of 4 sacks. Obviously, I mentioned had the fumble recovery and a touchdown. But what's impressive was also as well, the Packers offense didn't get 100 total yards till the fourth quarter. So the Jets really were phenomenal on the defensive side of the ball. As for a qualm for just the entire team, and obviously this was the first game of the preseason, and many things that are involved. There's a new coaching staff, new style of play, aggressiveness, whatever. Jets had a lot of penalties tonight. And you saw in the first quarter, I believe it was, where 2 Jets players, Eric Watts and Marcelino McCrary-Ball, were penalized for 2 personal fouls out of bounds, the unnecessary roughness penalties. And a lot of people brought it up on Twitter that Aaron Glenn basically gave it to McCrary-Ball, and he gave him a side eye too. But regardless, you like to see Aaron Glenn hold guys accountable for their silly mistakes, and those mistakes are completely avoidable. And it's not only the Jets that were affected by penalties, the Packers, towards the end of the game, and in terms of the third quarter as well, when they were really trying to drive on the Jets, trying to make a comeback, too many penalties from the Packers. But in terms of the Jets' perspective, the penalties are something that they have to clean up. Not too many pre-snap penalties, but holding in the secondary and the personal fouls is something they'll have to correct. With that being said, the New York Jets will face the New York Giants next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at MetLife Stadium for their second preseason game. They will also have, prior to the game, during the week, joint practices with the Giants. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of there. But regardless, I'll have you guys covered. And if you guys haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, turn the notification bell so you know when I go live or drop a new video. Going to keep you guys updated with the preseason content, regular season content too, obviously down the line. But right now, it's training camp battles, it's joint practices, it's preseason game recaps, and previews too. But with that being said, I'll talk to you guys later. Go Jets.